Hey everybody, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and I know what a lot of you are thinking right now. I hang out with Matt quite a bit, and he has a voice like a prepubescent boy, and all I'm hearing here is lumberjack masculinity, and I refuse to accept that it's the same person. Well, it requires a lot of disease, but this is how I sound when I'm in this stage of sick, so here we are. Hey, big thanks to Jeff Foote for jumping in and covering the podcast yesterday on zero notice. That guy is good at things. But it's been a good week other than this stupid congestion thing that I'm dealing with. Because it's anniversary week and I really like my wife and it's been many years of happy marriage for us. And so we decided to go out on a date and we went up into the Black Hills, which is where we live, Mount Rushmore territory. It's beautiful this time of year, but it's very, very crowded this year. And so I'm finding myself anytime we want to go eat somewhere, you got to hustle. And even as I pull into the parking lot, a lot of times I'll have a member of the family bail out and go get our name on the list because just the amount of time it takes to park can be enough for 5 or 6 groups to get in ahead of you. And then you got to think about that the whole time you watch them getting seated and you're sitting out there for an extra half an hour waiting to get in to grab a bite to eat. Well, last night we went to Hill City. There's this cool German restaurant called the Alpine Inn. They only serve like 2 things on the menu. They got a filet and they got some, I don't know, European, German ethnic thing that I can't pronounce. So everybody knows what they're getting. It's beautiful. It's very popular and it is teeming with people as we pull up. So I park the car really quickly. We hop out and I'm hurrying right along because I can see that, again, there's 5, 6, 7 groups all making their way toward that door. Well, because of my attentiveness, I get ahead of all of them. And then the closest group is about 20 feet behind us. It's a couple of ladies, but I was feeling really good that I'm going to be the first one to the check-in line. So we get up there, we get checked in. The lady's great. She says it's going to be about 2 hours and gives us a little buzzer thing. Oh, 2 hours, bummer. Which I'm not excited about, but this is a really special place to eat, and it's a beautiful evening. We'll go walk around. It's just fine. Well, the 2 ladies who were behind us were disappointed to hear the amount of time. As I'm patting myself on the back for being first of this new rush of people, a couple of bikers walk in who apparently had run out of daylight, and they walk up to the 2 gals that I beat to the door, and they're like, I think we've got to be up next, but we're just out of time. Do you want this? And they gave them their spot in line. And the thing immediately starts buzzing. And in that moment, and I'm not joking right now, the emotion that flashed within me was, this is going to be really great for the podcast because I'm talking about the first being last at the end of Matthew 19, and I need to cover that this week. I busted my butt, maybe even sacrificed a little bit of dignity to make sure that I was first, looking out for my lady, looking out for our evening, looking out for us. But the joke was on me because if I just hadn't worried about it and I've been like, well, if people get ahead of us, they get ahead of us. They need to eat too. And just been chill about it, I would have been rewarded by actually being first. And isn't it just a weird equation to think about at all? Like, should I have been a little more humble so I could get more stuff? I mean, either way, the way I just characterized it to you is all predicated on me caring about myself and me getting things first. This is a very tricky question to even engage with, and it's tricky when Peter brings it up at the end of Matthew chapter 19, after the rich young ruler has walked away sad, and Jesus says all this stuff about camels and needles and all of this business. And then Peter, just to read it to you in Matthew 19:27, says, we've left everything to follow you. What then will there be for us? And as Jeff covered yesterday, very effectively, I might add, Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And regardless of what one might make of the grand unfolding of future things according to the Bible, there's a pretty clear distinction here being drawn between the 12 disciples and Israel. So at the very least, as we talked about yesterday, it looks like there's a role for both, and there's still some more stuff that needs to unfold here. But ultimately, the idea is that there is this new family of faith, and that the completion and the fulfillment of all of the stuff that we've seen rolling around through the gigantic chunk of Bible you have behind you right there, the stuff we call the Old Testament, the completion of that is realized in the kingdom and in the establishment of the subjects of the kingdom, this new family of faith. So that in and of itself is an answer to Peter's question. And he's like, well, what are we going to get out of the deal? Well, I don't know. If you're really into being in a position of gigantic authority and being vindicated in front of everyone who's irritated with you, including the people who eventually are going to crucify you upside down, you might enjoy this little tidbit. You're going to be in a position of clarity because you're actually in the right here, and you're not just sons of the king. You are heirs of the king. You are agents. You have a role in this kingdom, and it's a significant one. Is Jesus talking about the individual disciples there or the church as a whole? Well, he's going to go off into a big, long speech here in a little bit that'll help us get more to the bottom of that. But what I do know is this promise of position has something to do with Peter's question. What do we get? Well, you're going to be in these roles. I mean, you're trading out short-term stuff by hitching your allegiance to something that is definitely going away for long-term stuff of value by hitching your allegiance to something that is going to exist forever. And then verse 29, Jesus continues his answer to Peter. He says, and everyone who's left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. So in addition to being in a position of responsibility in the kingdom of the great king, you also have the thing where you live forever. And that's a reflection back on the original question that set this whole ball in motion. Remember, I mean, the rich young ruler showed up and he asked, teacher, what good thing must I do? Remember, was it to be in the kingdom or to be a Christian or to give my heart to you? No, the question he asked was, teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life? And then as we've covered at great length, Jesus reframes that question in light of a kingdom context and kingdom values and in light of a right posture before the king, something that this, I think, nice young man pretty clearly, at least at this point in his life, lacked. But here Jesus is saying anybody who ditches all the things that are comfortable, all of the world currency stuff, even good and beautiful world currency stuff like family, stuff that nobody in their right mind could get after you for caring about. People who leave all of that stuff, and there's eternal life with a great return, an order of magnitude return. And by talking about this receiving 100 times as much, Jesus is hearkening back to this productivity theme, this reward theme that he's touched on a bunch already, very notably in the Kingdom Parables discourse in Matthew 13, when we get the most famous parable there about the sower, where the seed that lands on the good soil produces 30, 60, or 100 times what it originally was. This also gives us a little bit of a preview of the parable of the talents that we're going to get to in a few chapters here, where the master gives everybody some coins and the expectation is go and invest it and get a return on it. We'll break that down later on. And this is probably pretty difficult for Peter to hear because we've got enough context clues to say the guy was probably married. He probably had left spouse and children behind, at least for this chunk of time. It's not like he'd never see him again, but he's taking huge risks at this point. He doesn't know if he's ever coming home or not. I mean, for crying out loud, the guy was so into this thing. He walked into the middle of a raging sea during a storm barefoot into the depths. I mean, there's a chance that he's not going to come out of this thing alive. And no doubt he's thinking about what might I be giving up here. But Jesus isn't asking Peter to go somewhere he's not willing to go. And remember what Jesus said at the end of, I can never remember, is it 12? It's got to be 12, right? Yeah, where Jesus' family came to claim him while he was teaching. And he's like, hey, who are my mother and my brothers? And then he points to this new family of faith, my true mother and brothers and sisters. They're the people who are doing the will of my Father in heaven. So again, family, very important. It's a beautiful, important thing, but this new family of faith would seem to be the even bigger deal, which I understand is a challenging thing to make compute because it seems like nothing would be more transcendent than family, other than an even truer, realer family that never gets old and never ages and is never separated by death and is headed by a patriarch who never, ever, ever goes away and is benevolent and provisional and just and good in all of his leadership for all of eternity. I mean, in that case, I guess it would be a better family. And then it comes back to the stuff that I was talking about at the beginning. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. The desire to weasel to the front is not a kingdom value. It's reflective of pride, of self, and of not assuming the right posture before the king. So it doesn't make a lot of sense given all the other values of the kingdom. In fairness to all of us who are just reading this thing through together chronologically, at this point in the text, We're still going to have questions about this paradox, first, last, first. How does that actually work? I mean, it kind of smacks of the blind can see and the people who can see are actually blind. But we get this goofy chapter division that is not part of the actual Bible. This is after the fact here between chapters 19 and 20. I don't think there should be any division here at all. I think it creates a little bit of chaos for the reader because the next thoughts we're going to look at in chapter 20 flow directly from this statement that Jesus just made, which flows directly from the question Peter asked about what then will be there for us, which flows directly from Jesus saying that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man into heaven, which flows directly from the rich young ruler asking what he has to do to get eternal life. It's all one big block of thought, and we're about to get another kingdom parable coming up next. It starts with the old familiar formula for the kingdom of heaven is like, and then at the very end of that parable in Matthew 20, verse 16, look out, it says again, so the last will be first and the first will be last. So I guess if we want to understand Jesus' closing statement here, we're going to have to work through that parable to get it a little bit better. There's a new episode of Ironwood Rhino that came out this week. I think it's really super good and interesting. I've greatly appreciated the feedback from those of you who listen here and then made their way over to Ironwood Rhino. You are connecting the dots on what I'm going for there. I want to do these thought exercises about things that are right at the boundaries of the natural and the knowable, because I think our ability to process things in that realm has atrophied a little bit in recent years. And I think that thought exercise we're doing over there of thinking about the abstract is only going to make us better at what we're doing over here. And hopefully what we're doing on Ironwood Rhino will also make the conversation you and I are having here, the big conversation, that much more accessible to a whole bunch of people who right now are on the outside looking in. I appreciate you. Thanks for enduring my voice. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.